Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We got some really interesting excerpts from Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, so I wanted to break those down with you.
Yeah, it's a classic for a reason, right? I mean, these habits, they're not just some quick tips or tricks.
Right.
They really lay out a foundation for how to build a life based on principles.
And that's what makes them timeless,
Exactly.
no matter what your goals are.
Absolutely.
Okay, so habit number 1, be proactive.
Yes.
I feel like this is a word I hear everywhere these days, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. You hear it a lot.
Right.
But I think in the context of the 7 habits, being proactive really means recognizing that you're in the driver's seat of your own life.
Okay.
So it's about taking responsibility for your choices and your reactions rather than blaming external circumstances or other people.
Okay, so it's not just about taking initiative.
Yeah.
It's more about like owning your choices.
Exactly. And it's about realizing that you can't always control what happens to you,
Right.
but you can control how you respond.
I like that distinction.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, oh, I'm stuck in this dead-end job,
Yeah,
a proactive person would be like, what can I do to find a job that I love?
exactly. You hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
And Covey, he actually talks about this idea of the circle of influence versus the circle of concern.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. And so proactive people, they tend to focus their energy on their circle of influence.
So the things that they can control.
Yes, exactly. And, instead of worrying about things that are outside of their control, like the weather or, traffic.
Which I do a lot.
Yeah, we all do, right?
Yeah.
But think about it. Instead of complaining about that traffic, maybe you use that time to listen to a podcast or, plan out your day.
Or you maybe call your mom.
Exactly. It's about being a solution seeker instead of, just being a victim of circumstance.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah.
Solution seeker.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to write that down.
There you go.
Okay. So that's being proactive.
Yes.
Habit number 1.
Habit number 1.
What about habit 2? Begin with the end in mind.
Okay, so this one sounds pretty straightforward.
It is.
But I think there's actually a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so it's about envisioning where you want to go in life and then making sure your actions are aligned with that vision.
I mean, that makes sense. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there.
Exactly. And Covey, he uses this really powerful image.
Okay.
He asks you to imagine your own funeral.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and what do you want people to say about you?
That is powerful.
Right. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
I've never thought about it like that.
And this exercise, it can really help you clarify your values, It can help you make sure you're living in a way that's truly meaningful to you.
Wow.
And it doesn't have to be that, morbid.
Right.
It can be something smaller, too. Like, imagine yourself giving a presentation at work, and you see yourself being confident and engaging and really connecting with the audience.
Okay.
And then you work backwards. Oh, I like that.
Right. What steps do you need to take to make that vision a reality?
So it's like you're setting a goal and then making a plan to actually achieve it.
Exactly. It's about being intentional and creating a roadmap for your life, both in the big picture and for those everyday goals.
Okay, so we've got our vision, we've got our roadmap.
Yes.
What about habit 3? Put first things first. How does that fit into all of this?
This is where we get into execution.
Okay.
Think of this habit as your project manager.
Okay.
It's about prioritizing
Okay.
what truly matters.
Yeah.
And having the discipline to stick to those priorities.
So it's not just about getting things done. It's
Right.
about getting the right things done.
Exactly. It's so easy to get caught up in those urgent tasks.
Oh, yeah.
Like responding to every email as soon as it comes in or, scrolling through social media.
Guilty as charged.
But what if we dedicated more time to those activities that are important but maybe not so urgent? Things like spending time with loved ones or working on a personal project or just taking care of our health, right? Those things are important.
Yeah, and they often get neglected.
Because they don't feel urgent.
Exactly. But they contribute so much to our overall well-being and happiness in the long run.
I feel like this is where Covey's time management matrix comes in, right?
Yes, he talks about focusing on quadrant 2, which are those activities that are important but not urgent.
Okay.
And it's about being proactive, like we talked about in habit 1, and planning ahead so that we can actually make time for these things.
So instead of just reacting to whatever comes up,
Right.
you're intentionally creating space for those important activities.
Exactly. It's about being intentional with your time and energy and shifting from that reactive mode to a proactive mode.
And taking control of your schedule rather than letting it control you.
There you go. You got it. So welcome back to our deep dive into the 7 habits.
Yes.
We've covered the first 3 habits, those private victories, as Covey calls them. And now we're moving into public victory territory with habits 4, 5, and 6. And this is where we start applying these principles to our interactions with other people.
This is where it gets really interesting for me.
Yeah.
Because I feel like so much of our success and happiness depends on our relationships.
Absolutely.
So habit 4, think win-win.
Yes.
This is another phrase I hear all the time.
I do hear it a lot.
Especially in business. But I'd love to unpack what it actually means.
Yeah, it's definitely become a bit of a buzzword.
Right.
But I think at its core, win-win is about a fundamental shift in how we view relationships and problem solving.
Okay.
It's not just about compromise. It's about finding solutions where everyone feels like they've gained something.
So it's more about collaboration and creativity.
Exactly. It's about asking, how can we work together to create a solution that meets everyone's needs?
Okay, so it's not your way or my way. It's a better way.
I like that. A better way.
Yeah.
And Covey, he talks about this idea of moving from a scarcity mentality to an abundance mentality.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Have you? Yeah, so the scarcity mentality, it's that belief that there's only so much to go around.
Right, like if you win, I lose.
Exactly. But the abundance mentality recognizes that there's plenty out there for everyone.
So it's not about dividing the pie.
Right.
It's about baking a bigger pie.
I love that. Baking a bigger pie.
Yeah.
That's a good
I'm
one.
going to steal that.
Please do.
But honestly, I struggle with this sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Like I see someone getting a promotion at work,
Mm-hmm.
and honestly, sometimes my first thought isn't, yay for them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's, what about me?
Oh, yeah. I think we all have those moments.
Right?
Yeah, it's totally natural to feel that way.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm not a terrible person.
No, not at all. But I think the key is to recognize those thoughts and challenge them.
Okay.
Instead of comparing yourself to others, what if you focused on your own journey?
And your own definition of success.
Exactly. And when you start to see other people's wins as opportunities for collaboration or learning,
Yeah.
you're shifting into that abundance mentality.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah. So it's about changing your perspective on success and recognizing that someone else's success doesn't diminish your own.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense in theory. But how do you actually put this into practice?
That's a $1,000,000 question, right?
Yeah, like if I'm in a negotiation, for example, how do I make sure everyone walks away feeling good about the outcome?
Well, I think it starts with integrity.
Okay.
Being true to yourself and your values.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's about maturity, which Covey describes as finding that balance between courage and consideration.
Okay, so you need the courage to stand up for what you want.
Yes.
But also the consideration to understand the other person's needs and perspectives.
Exactly. And then, of course, it's about cultivating that abundance mentality that we talked about.
Okay, so it's not about being a pushover or manipulating people to get what you want.
Right.
It's about genuinely trying to find a solution that benefits everyone.
Exactly. And this makes me think about, everyday situations. Like, let's say you have a roommate and you're always clashing over chores. Yeah. And it always ends up with one of you feeling resentful.
Yep.
So what if instead of arguing about who's doing more, you sat down together and, created a chore chart that felt fair to both of you?
So you're turning it into a collaboration.
Exactly. Instead of a
Yeah.
competition.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. And you can even make it fun, put on some music.
Have a chore dance party.
Exactly. Make it a win-win for everyone.
Okay, so you've got that win-win mindset. But how do you actually build win-win relationships?
That's where the emotional bank account comes in.
Oh, yes, I remember this.
Yeah, so Covey uses this analogy of a bank account,
Mm-hmm.
but instead of money, you're depositing and withdrawing things like trust and kindness and respect.
So deposits are things like keeping your promises,
Yes.
being kind and respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And withdrawals are things like breaking promises, being disrespectful or judgmental.
Exactly. And just like with a financial bank account, if you're constantly making withdrawals, the relationship is going to suffer.
Right. But if you make regular deposits
You build up that reserve
of trust and goodwill.
Exactly. And that reserve is what allows for open communication, vulnerability, and that creative problem solving that we talked about.
It's like you're building a safety net for the relationship.
I like that, a safety net.
So even when disagreements inevitably come up,
Right.
you have that foundation of trust to fall back on.
Exactly. It gives you the space to have those tough conversations without fear of damaging the relationship.
So it's like you're investing in a long-term bond.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting in the effort to create something strong and resilient.
I love that analogy. So we've talked about how to approach relationships with a win-win mindset. But what happens when you're dealing with someone who isn't operating from that same perspective?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
It's a great question.
Like, what if you're trying to be collaborative, but the other person is stuck in a win-lose mentality?
Right.
Can you even create a win-win situation then?
It can be challenging, for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's impossible. Covey really emphasizes that the relationship is still key.
Okay.
So instead of trying to force them to see your point of view, focus on building trust and understanding.
So you're leading by example.
Exactly. You're showing them what win-win looks like, even if they're not quite ready to embrace it fully yet.
Okay.
And sometimes the most win-win solution is to walk away.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, if you've tried your best to find a mutually beneficial solution, but the other person is just unwilling to budge, it's okay to say no deal. You know,
Yeah.
You don't have to sacrifice your own values or integrity just for the sake of reaching an agreement.
So sometimes walking away is the healthiest choice.
I think so, yes. Both for yourself and for the relationship.
Okay, that's a good reminder.
Yeah.
But let's say you are able to establish that win-win mindset with someone.
Okay.
How do you actually translate that into concrete actions and outcomes?
That's where win-win performance agreements come in. So these agreements, they outline the desired results, and they empower people to achieve those results in their own way.
Okay, so instead of micromanaging and dictating every step,
Right.
you're focusing on the end goal and giving people the autonomy to get there
Yeah.
using their own skills and creativity.
Exactly. It's a shift from what Covey calls gopher delegation to stewardship delegation.
Okay, what's the difference?
So with gopher delegation, you're basically using people as extensions of yourself.
Okay,
You're telling them exactly what to do and how to do it.
got it.
But with stewardship delegation, you're empowering them to take ownership
Okay,
and use their judgment to achieve the desired outcome.
so you trust them to figure out the how as long as they deliver the what.
Exactly. And this requires clear expectations, open communication, and mutual accountability.
Okay, so everyone's on the same page.
Yes, and Covey, he shares this really cool story about a company that transformed its training program by using this approach.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the program actually became significantly shorter and more effective because the trainees were given more ownership over their learning process.
So they were more engaged.
Yes, and they were more motivated to succeed because they felt like they had a stake in the outcome.
That's fascinating.
And it's not just limited to business settings. You know, think about how this applies to parenting.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Instead of constantly telling your kids what to do,
Right.
what if you involve them in creating family rules or chore charts?
That makes sense.
When they feel like they have a voice and a choice, they're more likely to be cooperative and responsible.
Right. They feel like they're part of the solution.
Yeah, exactly. It's about creating that win-win dynamic where everyone feels heard, respected, and empowered.
And that leads us perfectly into habit 5.
Yes.
Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Such an important one.
Especially these days.
Right.
When it feels like communication breakdowns are happening all the time.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's talking, but no one's really listening.
Exactly.
So how do we break out of that cycle?
Yeah. How do we start truly understanding each other? I think we're so used to just waiting for our turn to talk.
Yeah, Covey calls that autobiographical listening.
Yeah.
You know, we're so focused on filtering everything through our own experiences and biases
Right.
that we don't really hear what the other person is saying.
Yeah. I'm definitely guilty of that.
We all are.
But how do we shift from that self-centered listening
Right.
to a more empathic approach?
Well, I think it starts with a genuine desire to understand the other person.
Okay.
You know, putting aside your own agenda and truly opening yourself up to hearing what they have to say.
It's like you have to actively choose to listen
Yes, exactly.
and to really try to see things from their perspective.
And Covey, he uses that really powerful analogy of the optical illusion.
Oh, yeah. The one where you can see either a young woman or an old woman.
Yeah, depending on how you look at it.
Right.
And it's such a good reminder that there's always more than one way to see things.
And that our own perspective isn't always the only one. So how do we actually do that in a conversation? Like, what are some practical tips for becoming a more empathic listener?
Well, I think first it's important to pay attention to your body language.
Okay.
Are you making eye contact?
Right.
Are you nodding your head or are your arms crossed?
Yeah. Are you looking at your phone?
Exactly. All of those nonverbal cues, they can communicate just as much as words.
So it's about creating a space where the other person feels heard and respected.
Yes. And then it's about reflecting back what you're hearing to make sure you understand.
Okay.
You can paraphrase what they've said
Mm-hmm.
or ask clarifying questions.
But you're not just passively listening.
Right.
You're actively engaging with what they're saying.
Exactly. And it shows them that you're really listening and that you care about understanding their perspective.
And it helps prevent misunderstandings and assumptions.
Absolutely. And remember, empathic listening doesn't mean you have to agree with the other person.
Right.
It's about understanding their perspective, even if you don't share it.
This makes me think about a recent conflict I had with a coworker.
Mm-hmm.
I was so focused on defending my own position that I didn't really take the time to understand where they were coming from.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
If I had just practiced empathic listening,
Yeah.
I think we could have resolved the situation much more effectively.
I think so, too. It's amazing how much conflict can be avoided or resolved just through listening to understand.
It's powerful.
It is, but it's important to remember that habit 5 is a two-way street.
Oh, right.
Once you've sought to understand, you also need to be understood.
So it's not just about listening.
Right.
It's also about communicating your own thoughts and feelings in a way that's clear and respectful.
Exactly. And Covey talks about the importance of using I statements to express your own perspective. So instead of saying you're wrong,
Right.
you might say I see things differently or I feel hurt when.
So you're taking ownership of your own feelings.
Yes.
And expressing them in a way that invites dialogue rather than defensiveness.
Yes. Exactly. And once you've established that foundation of mutual understanding, then you can start working together to find solutions that work for everyone.
Which leads us perfectly into habit 6.
Yes.
Synergize.
Synergies.
I love that word. It suggests this kind of creative energy that emerges when people work together effectively.
It's about recognizing that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Right.
When people with different perspectives and skill sets come together and collaborate in a spirit of mutual respect, they can create something truly extraordinary.
Like that saying, 2 heads are better than 1.
Exactly, but it's more than just brainstorming ideas.
Right.
Synergy is about creating a culture of collaboration where everyone feels valued and respected and where different perspectives are seen as assets rather than obstacles.
So how do you create that kind of culture? It sounds great in theory, but in practice it can be difficult to get everyone on the same page and working together effectively.
Well, I think it starts with leadership. Leaders who model win-win thinking and empathic communication, they create an environment where synergy can flourish.
So they set the tone for the whole team.
Exactly. And it's also about creating structures and processes that support synergy.
Okay. Like what?
Covey talks about the importance of having clear goals,
Right.
open communication channels, and a willingness to embrace conflict as an opportunity for growth.
Oh, that part about conflict is interesting.
Yeah.
We often see conflict as something negative to be avoided,
Right.
but you're saying it can actually be a catalyst for synergy.
When conflict is approached with respect and a genuine desire to understand different perspectives, it can lead to breakthroughs and innovations that wouldn't have been possible otherwise.
So it's about shifting our mindset from conflict is bad to conflict is an opportunity.
Exactly. And it's about having the skills to navigate conflict effectively, which is something we can all learn and develop.
That's a good point.
Covey actually shares this really inspiring story about a company that transformed its training program by empowering trainees to take ownership of their learning process.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the trainees, they actually worked collaboratively, sharing their knowledge and skills, and the program became significantly shorter and more effective.
So it was a win-win for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The company saved time and money, and the trainees got a better learning experience.
It's amazing how synergy can unlock human potential and create a more fulfilling and productive work environment.
And it's not just limited to the workplace, you know? Think about how this applies to families, communities, and even global issues.
Right.
When people come together with a shared sense of purpose and a willingness to collaborate, they can achieve incredible things.
It makes me think of that quote. The best way to predict the future is to create it.
Oh, I like that one.
We have the power to create a more synergistic world, one interaction at a time.
And that brings us to our final habit. Habit 7, sharpen the saw.
Ah, yes, the final habit.
This one's a little different.
It does feel a bit different from the others.
It is, but it's equally important.
So how does sharpening the saw fit into the overall framework of the 7 habits?
It's about recognizing that we can't be effective in any area of our lives if we're running on empty.
Right. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. We need to take care of ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually in order to show up as our best selves.
I think a lot of us forget that.
We do. We get so caught up in the busyness of life.
And we think we can just keep pushing and pushing without taking a break.
Right, and eventually we burn out.
So Sharpen the Saw is about creating a sustainable lifestyle
Yes.
that supports our well-being in all areas of our lives.
Exactly, and Covey uses this analogy of a lumberjack who's trying to cut down a tree with a dull saw.
Okay.
He's sawing and sawing, but the tree's barely budging.
I can picture it.
A passerby suggests he stop and sharpen the saw, but the lumberjack says, I don't have time to sharpen the saw. I'm too busy sawing.
Oh, that's classic, working harder, not smarter.
Exactly, and so many of us do that in our own lives.
We get so caught up in the doing that we forget about the being.
Right, and sharpen the saw, it's about making time for those activities that nourish and replenish us.
So it's about more than just getting enough sleep and eating healthy foods.
It is. It's about taking a holistic approach to self-care.
Okay.
Finding activities that bring you joy, connecting with nature, spending time in quiet reflection, nurturing your relationships, and engaging in activities that challenge you mentally and spiritually.
It's about creating a life that is balanced and fulfilling.
Exactly, and it's about making a conscious effort to continuously learn and grow.
So always be learning.
Yes, Covey talks about the importance of reading good books, attending inspiring lectures, and engaging in meaningful conversations.
Right. Always expanding your horizons.
Exactly, and he also emphasizes the importance of service,
Oh, yeah.
of finding ways to contribute to something larger than yourself.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected.
Yeah, and that we have a responsibility to make a positive impact on the world.
Okay, so as we sharpen our saw in all these different areas of our lives, we become more effective in everything we do.
Exactly. We have more energy, more resilience, more creativity, and more compassion.
It's like we're upgrading our operating system,
I like that analogy.
giving ourselves the tools and resources to live a more fulfilling and impactful life.
And it's a journey that never ends. There's
Right.
always more to learn, more to experience, and more to become.
This has been such an incredible deep dive into the 7 habits.
It's been fun talking about it.
I feel like I have a whole new framework for thinking about effectiveness, both in my personal life and in my work.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's a powerful set of principles that can truly transform your life if you put them into practice.
And I know I'm definitely going to be revisiting these habits and finding ways to integrate them more fully into my own life.
I hope you do.
What are some final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
I would say remember that true effectiveness, it's not about achieving external success
Right.
or accumulating possessions.
It's about something deeper.
It is. It's about living a life of integrity where your actions are aligned with your values. It's about building strong, healthy relationships based on trust and mutual respect.
And it's about making a positive contribution to the world.
Exactly. The 7 habits, they provide a roadmap for that journey, but it's up to each of us to take the first step.
And that's your deep dive for today. We hope this exploration of the 7 habits has sparked some new ideas and inspired you to embark on your own journey of effectiveness. What stood out to you the most from these 7 habits? What feels most relevant to your life right now? Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.